We're going to begin with President Trump ramping up threats against the city of Chicago. So he spent the weekend targeting America's third largest city on social media. It includes this post we're going to show you on Truth Social, which appears to be AI generated. And it says in part, Chicago is about to find out why it's called the Department of War. Well, Illinois' governor called the president's actions not normal and said his state won't be intimidated by a, quote, wannabe dictator.
This heated rhetoric comes as the Trump administration is stepping up its deportation efforts. Those efforts have sparked nationwide outrage with protests in some cities over the weekend. On Friday, federal agents arrested nearly 500 people, mostly South Korean nationals, at a Hyundai plant in Georgia. ICE also launched new operations in Massachusetts, which it says will target criminal undocumented immigrants. We're getting the latest gauge of the president's popularity as well. A new NBC News Decision Desk poll finds 43% of U.S. adults say they approve of President Trump's job so far. His worst rating is an issue that used to be a strength for him, the economy, with voters disapproving of his handling of inflation and tariffs. NBC News senior national politics reporter John Allen is standing by to help us make sense of these approval numbers. Let's start with NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster, who is in Chicago, and NBC News investigative reporter Laura Strickler, who has the latest on immigration arrests. Good to have both of you with us. Shaq, let's start with you. So we know overnight President Trump doubled down on his claims that Chicago is, in his words, a very dangerous place. He said the administration plans to make a decision on what steps to take in the next 2 days. We've been waiting for this for a while. What's the city, what's the state doing to prepare for this potential influx of federal agents?
Good morning, guys. Well, when you listen to city leaders, when you listen to state leaders, they're all doing what they can to push back aggressively on what you're hearing from the president. They responded to that AI-generated image in that post on Truth Social by really saying that this, in their words, is a declaration of war against the city of Chicago. They're saying they're not taking this lightly, that they're taking his comments seriously. And the governor, in a tweet, actually writing, "This is not a joke. This is not normal." Now, when you ask what can city leaders do about it, how are they preparing, the honest answer is there's not much they can do about it when you're talking about potential immigration enforcement. Yes, they're going around, they're warning members of the community, or at least sharing with members of the community what they are hearing. They're hearing that ICE and other federal agencies are staging at federal bases in the suburban Chicago area. But there's not much that they can do to stop the actions. But they are warning that if the administration overreaches, they will take the administration to court. They just have to wait until there's some action that happens.
And Laura, we want to ask you about some of the operations we're seeing. The Department of Homeland Security launched a new ICE operation in Massachusetts over the weekend. They were calling this Patriot 2.0 and saying it was a follow-up from an operation back in May. Then this was roughly 1,500 arrests we saw. What do we know about this operation, and what are we hearing from Boston officials?
So last week, the Trump administration upped the ante, for this for the Operation Patriot by suing Boston for what they say is the illegal failure to cooperate with immigration enforcement, because they say Boston is a sanctuary city. And what that means is when they release someone who's in the U.S. illegally, they don't alert ICE to pick them up, to detain them, and ultimately deport them. So Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has insisted Boston law enforcement will not cooperate with federal immigration officials. And as you mentioned, this operation that was launched over the weekend, DHS told us in a statement, sanctuary policies like those pushed by Mayor Wu not only attract and harbor criminals, but also place these public safety threats above the interests of law-abiding American citizens. So we will be watching how this rolls out this week.
So, Shaq, talking about Chicago over the weekend there, people took to the streets to protest the Trump administration's threats. Just what are you hearing from people on the ground there?
Yeah, you saw some pretty sizable protests over the weekend here in Chicago. Thousands of people going out to the streets to protest not only the increased immigration enforcement that's expected to come, but the threats of sending in military troops to patrol the streets of Chicago. Look, here in Chicago, you're hearing a lot of fear, a lot of concern about the threats coming from the White House. But you're also hearing people say that they're not going to cower. There was a Mexican Independence Day parade that took place place throughout the one of the Latino majority neighborhoods of the city. And while organizers said that it was a little bit smaller than you would normally see, they said that they were ready. They had actual people going around on patrol with whistles, warning if they were to see any ICE or any federal agents there at that parade. But again, there is that fear here. There is that concern. But I should be clear. People are not saying that everything's perfect in Chicago. They do want to see crime addressed in different ways. They just don't believe that sending military-style vehicles and military personnel to essentially guard federal buildings around the city, that is the way to handle a violence problem.
Laura, let's talk about one other operation here. This was a workplace raid, and the Trump administration detained hundreds of South Korean nationals at a Hyundai plant. This was in Georgia on Thursday last week, as Joe just mentioned. Well, now South Korea's foreign minister is expected in the U.S. today. That's to talk about the release of those detainees. Where do things stand at this point between the U.S. and South Korea over something like this?
Yeah, so Savannah, this morning there is an ongoing aggressive effort by South Korean diplomats to resolve this. And they're telling us they're working to get a chartered flight to return those Korean nationals who are currently in a Folkestone, Georgia ICE processing center, to try to get them back to Korea as soon as possible. And this raid was one of the largest workplace enforcement raids in the history of ICE. As you said, they arrested 475 people, the overwhelming majority of whom are Korean nationals. The agents entered the plant at 10 a.m. on Thursday morning, and ICE officials were still processing the arrests on Friday evening.
All right, Shaq and Laura kicking us off this hour. We appreciate you both.
Thank you. Well, now let's bring in NBC News senior politics reporter John Allen to break down the results of NBC News' latest poll about President Trump's job performance, among a bunch of other things. John, good morning. So we had mentioned a moment ago the president's poor rating when it comes to the economy. Obviously, you know that's a hugely important issue to Americans right now and really always. But what other issues did the poll reveal as top priorities?
Well, I think what's fascinating is that immigration, which is the issue that President Trump has spent so much time on, is fifth on the list at 9% being the most important issue. And I think there are a couple reasons for that. Number one, of course, the economy is always the thing that blots out the sun. But number two, I think there's some satisfaction with the border control piece of immigration. And I think that there's some dissatisfaction. If you look at the numbers in our polling, that people are less satisfied with the efforts to deport. So, for instance, 43% approve of the efforts to deport, while 47% approve of the border security piece with immigration. But the truth is, what's driving Donald Trump's numbers down is dissatisfaction with the economy, and particularly with inflation. He said during the campaign that he would end inflation on day one. And I think most Americans still feel like it's very difficult to make their dollar go as far as it used to.
And then we know President Trump ran on fixing the economy, on bringing down prices. I think many would argue it's the primary reason he did get elected. And we see in the poll, Americans, they're just not optimistic about their financial futures or the U.S. economy. That's a trend we've been seeing for a few years right now. But how's it playing out in this most recent poll?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, Joe? I missed a little bit of it.
No worries. Just how you talk more about how the economy is playing out in this poll here, how people are feeling about it, knowing that that is perhaps the primary reason President Trump was elected.
Yeah, I mean, again, inflation is, by far the thing that people care most about, or at least the perception that of inflation and the belief that they're not able to get ahead as fast. Everything else sort of sits below that. 45% said that inflation was the biggest issue. So, people are worried about the cost of healthcare. People are worried about how far, how much take-home pay they're getting. Basically, they worry about taxes. But far and away inflation.
John, what do we learn when it comes to the president's overall approval rating? And can you kind of put it in context for us?
Yeah, I mean, the president's overall approval rating at 43% is not good. It's not the worst we've seen in any poll about President Trump over the course of his two terms. At times he's been in the high 30s. I mean, it's basically Biden territory. And there's some percentage of Americans who have not been satisfied with Joe Biden and not been satisfied with Donald Trump. And I think the driver of that is the economy for both of those presidents. It's just simply, look, I mean, you guys, I'm sure occasionally go out to dinner with your family. I'm sure you pay car payments or house payments. It is more difficult than it was 5, 6, 7 years ago, simply to make ends meet. And I think most Americans feel that.
And John, there actually is one issue that Americans do appear to be more unified around than others. That is support for vaccines. And the poll revealed majority support across party lines. And that's a huge issue right now, right?
It is a huge issue. In fact, you've got, we just had a hearing last week in Washington with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is being pushed on vaccines and what he plans to do on vaccines. He is, of course, somebody who has been a vaccine skeptic, I guess, at best, or a vaccine denier on the other end of things, but certainly somebody who has wanted to redo the way that our health system deals with vaccines. And you look at those polling numbers, most Americans still believe strongly or somewhat in the efficacy of vaccines and the goodness of vaccines. But that number is dragged up pretty heavily by 93% of Democrats feeling that way. You saw in those figures on the screen just a minute ago, independents and Republicans far below that, 67% for Republicans and 72% for independents.
All right, John Allen, thank you for your reporting as always.
In a developing story overnight, at least 5 people are dead and several others injured following a shooting in the outskirts of Jerusalem. Israel's emergency response service, MDA, says 2 gunmen opened fire on a crowd of people waiting at a bus stop. Police responded immediately, and the gunmen were, quote, neutralized. 4 men were pronounced dead at the scene. A woman who was evacuated in critical condition was later pronounced dead at a hospital. The attack happened shortly after rush hour along a highway that runs between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Hamas praised the shooting but did not take responsibility for it. The investigation into the shooting is ongoing.
Well, this morning, Hawaiians are bracing for the looming threat of Hurricane Kiko. While the now Category 2 storm is not predicted to make landfall, it is expected to send potentially life-threatening surf to the islands. This comes as communities in the Northeast are dealing with the aftermath of severe storms, including a rare tornado in Massachusetts. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson has all the details.
The slow, menacing march of Hurricane Kiko currently churning through the Pacific, putting Hawaii on high alert.
Have a plan. Think this thing through. Don't wait until that storm is approaching us.
Kiko intensified to a Category 4 over the last few days before weakening to a Cat 2. The path has it lumbering northwest at about 13 miles per hour, packing more than 100-mile-an-hour winds. But it's expected to slide just north of the Hawaiian Islands, avoiding landfall and weakening to a tropical storm. Meanwhile, parts of the Northeast cleaning up after a sucker punch of rain and wind from a series of late summer storms. Hardest hit Massachusetts.
We just survived a tornado,
where officials say a rare preliminary tornado touched down, pounding the area with heavy winds, spreading damage across this community.
This tree right here in our backyard ripped right out of the ground.
Multiple large trees sent sprawling across one street.
Wow. It took out the whole sidewalk.
And in New Jersey, this doorbell cam announcing an unwanted visitor as crews work to remove the scattered mess, leftovers from a powerful storm.
Our thanks to Steve Patterson for that report. Well, let's take a look at what you can expect from the week ahead with your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us this morning. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning, guys. And we're looking relatively quiet today. We have a few problem areas. We'll start out west because we're looking at cooler and wet conditions there in the northwest. That's going to linger for a couple of days. The middle of the country, for the most part, looking good, except for the central plains. We're tracking the chance for some severe storms. That includes winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour and could see some hail with any of those storms. Some showers in the upper Midwest. And then Florida, we're going to watch this all week long. We're looking at some pretty heavy rain, not only today, but tomorrow and through Friday with tropical downpour. So we're going to look at the chance for some flooding there. But look at the rest of the country, nice and dry. We're actually having a really cool start in portions of the upper Midwest, parts of the New England and Northeast area. Autumn feel. By this afternoon, we're going to warm up with the sunshine, but still below normal for this time of year. Then as we near Wednesday, we're looking at that northwest rain once again, portions of Washington into Oregon into Northern California, but the middle of the country nice and dry, warm throughout the Central Plains into the Northern Plains, the Southern Plains also. We're looking at coastal showers once again. Again, this will be a big topic as we go throughout this work week with those storms in Florida. Then by Friday, burn scar flooding. We're looking at showers from the Intermountain West down through the Four Corners. We're going to watch that closely as well. Plenty of sunshine through the Midwest, the Great Lakes, the Tennessee Valley into New England, and also the Northeast. That flood risk continues in Florida. Let's talk about Kiko because we're still looking at a Category 2 storm, winds at 100 miles per hour. So that's a weaker Category 2 storm, and that will be the trend as we go throughout the next couple of days. We're going to see it weaken as we head throughout at least Friday. So later on today, down to a tropical storm status, and then it's going to skirt north of the Hawaiian Islands as a tropical storm. So that's later on Tuesday. Still, though, we could see some rough surf, also some rip currents, locally heavy rain, and some gusty winds. Back to you guys.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. It has been nearly 1 year since the alleged assassination attempt of President Trump at his own golf course in Florida. That was the second incident of its kind in just a matter of months during his presidential campaign. Well, today, jury selection is set to begin in the federal trial for the man accused of plotting that attempt.
Yeah, that's for Ryan Wesley Ruth, and he's chosen to defend himself against 5 criminal charges, including attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate. If convicted, he could face life in prison. He's pleaded not guilty.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos is here with more on what to expect today. Danny, good morning. So at a pretrial hearing, Ruth first addressed the court by saying, obviously, I'm new to all this. I mean, these are serious charges. In a case of this magnitude, how rare is it to see a defendant defend himself?
Pro se defendants are at once the bane and the glory of the legal system. They are the bane for the actual litigants, for the prosecutor and the judge. But for observers like me, they are fascinating. I have a guilty pleasure. This is my pro se defendant playlist on YouTube on my phone. That's how much I like watching pro se defendants because they're fascinating. They are at once a celebration of the Constitution, but they're an utter disaster. These charges are actually, some of them might actually be defensible because Ruth never fired a shot. There's only some circumstantial evidence that this might have been an assassination attempt. But he will almost certainly lose because pro se defendants lose. As he said, he's new at all this, but the rules require, theoretically, that the judge consider that he knows all the same rules as an attorney when you represent yourself pro se. The reality is they don't do that. They give him something of a break. But chaos will result.
There's already been some interesting happenings. I mean, federal prosecutors have already limited what he can say at trial because of this pre-trial motion with these unconventional requests that he filed. For example, it included a suggestion that the case could be decided in a round of golf with the president.
That was the most benign thing in the motion, yes.
Right, so
go
tell
ahead.
us more about what was in there and how that kind of sets the tone for what we're going to see.
Oh, there was really references, I think, to a knockdown, drag-out brawl suggested by the defendant with the president. I believe there was a reference to strippers, golf, all kinds of stuff in that pro se. But by the way, as someone who has seen a lot of pro se defendants, those kinds of filings are not that unusual. They just file gobbledygook. It's just chaos when they're involved. And they write them from prison. They send them in, and the court has to file it. Here's the thing. The prosecution wisely is making motions and getting orders so that Ruth can't raise all kinds of nonsense during the trial. But good luck enforcing it. What do they care? The defendant doesn't care. He'll cause absolute mayhem. And what's the judge going to do? She still has to try the case. So this happens all the time. We've seen them in the rare instance when a pro se actually goes to trial, which is exceedingly rare. When they do go to trial, there's very little a judge can do to stop them from disrupting it with their nonsense.
Let's talk about the judge, because it's a Trump-appointed judge, Aileen Cannon, who, if people remember, she was the judge in a case where President Trump was actually the defendant. Back when Ruth had public defenders, they tried to get her removed from the case. She refused. What is this going to be like for her trying to manage the courtroom here? How tight of a leash do you expect her to keep Ruth on?
Yeah, I thought this was a good motion back when Ruth actually had counsel representing him. And by the way, he may still have standby counsel. An interesting rule is this, that a defendant has a qualified constitutional right to represent himself. It really isn't an absolute right. The judge can say either you're not competent, or the judge, if the testing shows that, or the judge can say you're just, too chaotic. I'm going to need someone to represent you, at least on standby. So standby counsel can be appointed even against the will of the defendant. So they'll be there and be available. Whether the defendant uses them is up to him. So here you have Aileen Cannon. I'm a little surprised she didn't recuse herself. It could be a bit of exposure on appeal for when he almost certainly gets convicted. But all that really means is that the judge is choosing to handle this case herself, which, frankly, most judges want nothing to do with a pro se defendant. Surprised she didn't recuse for that reason.
Danny, very quickly, what does this mean for how the prosecution constructs a case, knowing that this is on the other side?
Oh, this is a real challenge for them. Yes, they're almost certainly going to win, but every day is going to bring the unexpected. And by the way, don't be surprised if Ruth reconsiders it. A lot of these defendants will go right up to the line. Maybe they'll switch between attorney and self-representation just for delay. But any defendant a lot of them are playing games. Any defendant who has any self-preservation in mind, ultimately, when it gets to trial, the ruse disappears and they say, I think I actually need that attorney now.
All right, Danny, thank you so much.
Fiery one today.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.